Welcome to Biz Discovered. This is your host, Ernesto. Today's topic will be greenwashing, how some companies fake being green. I'm here with my co host today, Jess. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So I'll let you kind of tell us a little bit about greenwashing and more details of what it actually is and what it isn't.
So, greenwashing is really when companies fake being green or they want the image of being green, but don't necessarily do things that are environmentally friendly or make any changes. And it actually started in the hotel industry. Hotels started asking guests to reuse their towels for the environment because it's better for the environment. And it kind of came out that that was really not the case. It was just, it saved them money not having to wash the towels as often. So that's where we get the term green washing.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't know that. I didn't really know there was a name for it. I just knew, hey, this is what companies do, but didn't know there was a name behind it. Why?
Right. And so this doesn't really impact all companies that are having green initiatives. A lot of companies do mean it, and they try to make it work. It's just there's some companies that kind of try to ride on the trend of environmentally friendly when they're really not doing anything. They're spending more money on marketing a green image than doing any of the actual initiatives.
It's more so, hey, look at me, I'm doing good things, and behind the scenes, they're probably doing minimal work,
Exactly.
if anything.
Exactly. And so what you really need to look for with companies that have a green image are what verbiage are they using? What wording are they using? Did they just take their bottle and then they put a leaf or a tree or a little bird on it and said, see, we care? Or are they actually doing things behind the scenes? Does the packaging say made of 100% recycled materials? Or like we saw that water bottle where it said made from 0 to 50% recycled materials, which means they could do nothing and technically they're correct.
In that example, when you first showed me that, I was shocked to myself because I'm thinking everyone says, oh, made with so much percent. They're like, oh, it could be from 0 to something. So I'm like, so you're doing something or nothing and not telling me which one it is.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, again, maybe they're closer to the 50 range. Maybe they're not. We don't know. But it's kind of one of those things that you have to kind of dig deeper and think about or do research on. Another term to kind of look for is recyclable versus made of recycled materials. Mm-hmm. So if something is made of 100% recycled materials, then that's what it sounds like. It's made of recycled materials. But if it says it's recyclable, please recycle, that is also great. A lot of companies say that. They'll say, please recycle me to try to help the environment. But at the end of the day, if it's still made of plastic and you end up throwing it away with your normal trash and not recycling it, then that doesn't really help anybody. It's still going into a landfill just like any other plastic because it wasn't recycled. And the problem with plastic is that it doesn't break down. A lot of people, even if it's recyclable, that does not mean that it's biodegradable. Biodegradable means that it'll break down. A lot of like paper products are biodegradable. So in a few years, maybe it'll be completely dissolved into the earth and things like that. To where most plastics are going to outlive you, going to outlive me, going to outlive our grandkids. Plastic doesn't really usually decompose like that. And so is the product recyclable or is it biodegradable? So that if you don't recycle and it goes into a landfill, will it break down or won't it? And so those are kind of some of the terms to look for. And again, some of these companies are really on it. They're trying to make products that are better for the environment. But some companies are just trying to ride that trend.
I think it's a very good point you make when you bring up that, hey, just because it's recyclable, it doesn't get recycled. So it's a story from like my old job to where the owner of the business is a very much, hey, if people want to do it, I'm going to try my best to do what you want me to do. And one of them was, hey, the office was like, hey, we want to make sure we're recycling all the things possible. So what he did, he went and contracted with a company, got them to bring a bunch of stuff to recycle. So we could recycle anything we wanted.
Wow.
Paper, plastics, even different types of plastics, because not every plastic is recycled through the same process. Not every processing plant could recycle a certain types of bottle. So he did that. Then he found out people weren't actually doing it. So he was like, so I went in, invested in this, and not many people are recycling. And part of the problem is people may not know how to recycle. And that was one of the things he found out when he went to everyone in the office. It was like, hey, why aren't you recycling? Is it just because you're not interested? You don't know how? What is the issue? I want to know, understand. If there's something that I could do to help, I want to do that. And that's pretty much what it is. Most people didn't know how to recycle, or they knew, hey, not everything's recyclable, and I don't know how to tell the difference. What can we recycle here? So that was a big obstacle.
Yeah, a lot of things that does come up a lot because a lot of products are recyclable, but some collection facilities will only take certain kinds of plastic. So sometimes it'll take your drinking bottles or soda cans, but it won't take shopping bags or things like that. So that's a really good point about what can you recycle and having people educated on how to recycle.
And the other day when we were talking, you showed me an example of a company that was greenwashing and it had a bottle that was kind of disguised. Tell me about that.
So there was a company that got into some hot water because they had a bottle and it was paper, kind of like not cardboard looking, but paper in some way. And it said, "Hi, I'm a paper bottle." And people bought that product and they cut the paper open and it was just a wrapping around a plastic bottle. So when you cut open this paper, there's a plastic bottle in it. And so people were saying it's not a paper bottle, it's a plastic bottle with paper wrapped around it.
I can't get over that because I feel like that's the easiest example without having to dig deep into it, because that's clear as day. Oh, you tear us apart and there's a plastic bottle. There's no denying that. And like I mentioned to you earlier, you said look closely. One of the examples to actually dive deeper into the details, kind of like you mentioned earlier, is with carbon offsets. So what a carbon offset is saying, hey, I produce some carbon emission through my everyday activities, whether it be through flying across the country or charging my car or driving around, whatever it may be. I produce some set of carbon. So companies have programs say, hey, you can reduce the carbon impact by investing and donating to a cause that reduces the carbon. So the idea of that is I could offset my emissions by investing in some of these projects. And one of these projects is Hawk Preserve, which is a preservation in Tennessee. And one of the ways they try to quantify the effect these carbon offsets is to say, hey, this preserve, if we don't protect it, will have so many trees cut down. So by donating to this, you can prevent X amount of trees from cutting down, which by then says, hey, you can prevent so much carbon from entering the atmosphere. So there has to be some kind of prediction of what's going to happen if this company does not interfere with this cutting down of this forest. They'll say, hey, this is the results if we do nothing, and if we do something, we donate, this is the effect it will have. So they say, hey, this is the effect you could have on a preserve. That's the baseline. This is how much carbon you offset. In reality, it's already a preserve. It's not going to be destroyed.
Oh.
So what are you truly changing? There's no effect in this.
There's
but
no threat.
Yes. But then you could say, hey, I prevented this forest to be cutting down. In reality, it wasn't going to be cut down. So that's one of the things companies try to make themselves look good, but don't do much about it. And another way is through selling of carbon credits. So the government, which has a cap and trade program, which means they'll cap the amount of carbon that can be produced by a company. And if you use less carbon than that, you could sell your carbon credit, which is some kind of penalty if you produce over amount of carbon. Then you could sell that, I guess, waiver, I don't know how else to explain it, to another company who overproduces so they don't have to pay that fine.
So a company sells its unused credits to a company that went over?
Yes.
Okay.
And the idea behind that is it'll incentivize people to be green because now they can sell to other companies who are not as green. So when some of these bigger companies, one of the biggest offenders, or the ones that makes least amount of sense, is how does an oil company become carbon neutral? Well, they're buying those carbon credits. So they can say, hey, we offset our emissions by buying this carbon credit from Tesla, because Tesla is a pretty green company. They have electric cars. They reduce their emissions as much as possible. Therefore, at the end of the year, they typically have excess carbon credits so they sell to other companies. So maybe Shell or Exxon may come back and say, hey, we'll buy that credit, and now we can be carbon neutral because we offset our carbon emissions. In reality, yes, they may be doing some other things behind the scenes, but they don't actually emit zero carbon. So that's another definition that you may want to look deeper into, is what does carbon neutral actually mean? Are you actually producing no carbon? Are you buying offsets to reduce your actual carbon emissions? Or are you doing something else behind the scenes?
I'd never thought about that, because I've heard carbon neutral, we're carbon neutral, and I never really thought about it any more than that. I was like, okay, so that is definitely another one to look into.
And that's one of my favorite examples because it's easy to see. And logically, a company producing no carbon doesn't make sense.
Right.
How do you fulfill on this promise? Yes, some of these companies, especially with Shell and BP, are investing in solar farms and wind farms, which is helping a lot. But at the end of the day, you're still producing oil, drilling oil. And even then, when you say you're carbon neutral, do you mean just from your production standpoint? Do you mean from your suppliers? Because to make steel, they had to produce. So are you including that? Are you including the use of your product afterwards? That's kind of an argument some people have, is what does it actually mean? And if you produce a product that's carbon neutral in production, are you still responsible for its emission afterwards?
That makes sense. Like I said, I would have never thought that deeply about it, but it makes sense. People are not carbon neutral. Individuals use vehicles and things like that and produce carbon. So when you think about an entire Fortune 500 company, it makes sense that they wouldn't be carbon neutral.
I produce carbon just breathing, like you mentioned.
Exactly.
I'm a producer of carbon just by existing.
Exactly. So how can a company with all of this overhead be carbon neutral? So that's a really good example of that.
And do you have any other examples of companies trying to do something similar to it? Hey, they may be green, or maybe I'm misleading.
I mean, there are countless examples. You can search on the internet and you're going to find boom, 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 all kinds of examples of this. One more example, I guess, would be like Coca-Cola Life. So Coca-Cola created a product called Coca-Cola Life. It's in a green can, or green bottle or whatever. And it sounds great. Coca-Cola Life. It must be like good for you. It must be green because they put it in a green container. But what they did with Coca-Cola Life was they took out some of the sugar from their drink. Not all of the sugar. There's still some sugar, but they took out some of the sugar, and then they replaced it with stevia. And so stevia is kind of trendy right now as like a natural sweetener because stevia comes from a plant. But the thing about that kind of confuses me is that sugar also comes from a plant. It comes from sugarcane. And so Coca-Cola Life was not necessarily a green effort or anything like that, but it is another example of, okay, Coca-Cola Life, it kind of looks green, it looks great, it seems like it might be better for you, but what is different about it than the regular product? So it's another example of kind of do your research on what is this company saying and showing, and then what is kind of the context behind what they're saying and doing.
That's a good point. I know another example I had is in Ukraine. I know they're I probably shouldn't mention Ukraine right now. But let's just say there was a company overseas that was producing coal, or it's a power plant. They were trying to use this carbon offset program, saying, hey, we're going to drill up this, we're going to protect this coal mine from being burned. Because if you prevent coal from being burned, you're preventing emissions. So that's kind of the part that lies behind. So they got credit for that. But then they went behind the scenes and actually sold off that coal anyways and made money off their production as well as the carbon offset side of things. So they kind of double dipped on that. So
Wow.
watch for companies doing things like that. That's more of a rare example, but some, if nothing else, there's people out there who will find loopholes in the system.
Right.
So on top of this, of defining it properly, everyone think getting on a set definition and what it actually means is also the enforcement and transparency behind this.
Right.
To people actually know, are they actually doing what they're doing, or are they kind of giving a false impression or half truth?
Right. So I can bring up something about that.
Mm-hmm.
What people have to realize is that these companies don't just throw these terms out there. They have legal teams and marketing teams that are researching these terms and what can we call this? What can we market our product as? Like the word natural,
Mm-hmm.
there's no regulation for what that means, at least here in the US. You can say it's natural if it has, like you've seen, like potato chips, which are kind of known to be unhealthy, but they'll be marketed as with natural ingredients. Or even on ingredient lists, you'll see a product that's like with natural flavors. That'll actually be an ingredient on the ingredient list is natural flavors. What is that? There's not a lot of regulation with the word natural, so definitely don't fall for it. But definitely don't read the word natural and be like, oh, good, it's natural. It's totally healthy for me. Those are definitely not equal.
So don't assume things is what I'm getting at.
Exactly. Read a word, see kind of what they mean. And I know it's hard to research every single product that you use. Is this green? Is this green? What are they saying? We can't do that. But it's just something that if you have some spare time, or especially if it's like a large purchase or something you plan to purchase often and a business that you really plan to be a repeat customer of, know what they're telling you. And so kind of the purpose of this and the reason that I talk about this is not to bash any companies or say this company's good, this company's bad. It's really just to tell consumers to be aware of what's going on and be aware of kind of marketing tactics and what does this word actually mean and what is this company actually doing.
That I like the way you put that, because back to the example of the water bottle with 0 to what 50%, something like that.
Right.
They could be in that transition to where yes, it's they can't really say it's 100% or X amount of plastic because they're in a transition.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, is that an excuse, or is that them saying, hey, we're getting better over time?
Exactly. And it's hard to know sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the best example of that so far. So they could be a company doing better, but do your research is the end of the day.
Right.
I guess the thing to take away from this.
Exactly. And I know COVID hindered a lot of companies from going green. I remember a lot of grocery stores in like 2018, 2019 were saying we plan to be completely bagless by this year. And so that meant that you'd have to bring your own shopping bags. And so that was kind of a green environmental measure. But then COVID happened, and then people didn't want to touch other people's bags at the grocery store. And so a lot of that kind of got delayed because of COVID-19.
And especially caused an increase, I guess, in waste other ways, because then we had to have all these masks. Then there was no way to properly recycle those. I know some of them were recyclable,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's another thing to constantly evaluate of any product that we put out there. What are the long-term effects of these? Because there are some biodegradable masks out there too I see being made. They're like a one-time use, but they're biodegradable.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of ending up in the ocean. So I've seen some pictures where there's a bunch of masks next to the ocean.
And that's the perfect example of what we're talking about today is knowing the verbiage. If you have to buy a mask, maybe look for one that says biodegradable. But also, of course, make sure that it meets the safety parameters and things like that. But knowing what has to be thrown away, what's recyclable, and are any of the products available biodegradable?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with buying a product. Maybe try to support a company that uses paper packaging instead of plastic.
And no, there's some kind of trade-off one way or another with that. No, don't think there's no one best solution for anything.
Exactly.
But hey, what's the best I could do given the situation? And kind of make a decision off of there and try to be informed as possible.
That's exactly right. And we saw that kind of debate going on with straws. Because, of course, plastic straws are not really reusable. They're not really recyclable. I'm talking about like the single-use ones you get like at a restaurant. And so some companies started going to paper straws, but then sometimes the paper straws, what happens when paper gets wet? It starts to kind of crumble and it gets a really weird texture, And so that can be off-putting. And then some people argue, why use a straw at all? So there's definitely a debate going on there with kind of what's right and what's wrong. And it's hard to know what exactly is the best answer.
It's funny that you bring that up because I just got back from Jamaica not too long ago, and we had paper straws there, right? The resort we were at.
Really?
And so on one hand, I was kind of annoyed because you had the paper taste of it on your drink sometimes. But at the same time, I understood the benefits of it. And like you mentioned, that, hey, if I'm sitting there with an hour of my drink, it's going to be just mush by that point. But I could just not be using a straw in the first place, which I don't normally use a straw in the first place. So I don't know why didn't think of that. But it's those little life decisions that I need to think of, be aware of, and say, hey, what could I change? And what should I change? And maybe the things I had been doing is probably not the best way.
Yep, exactly.
Just a food for thought.
That's what this is. This is food for thought. Knowing what verbiage to use, thinking about, do I need this product at all? Yeah, for sure.
I know when I go to the store, if I could carry it in my hand, I don't get a bag for it. So if I go in 1 or 2 items, I carry it. I mean, I've gone out the store like this before with products because I don't see a need for it if I could just carry it.
Yeah.
Like when people bag milk, I understand the milk's cold, but it already has a handle on it. Do I really need a bag for that milk? Yep. There's nothing else you can put in that bag. If you put bread in there, it's going to be smushed.
Exactly.
So it's not really greenwashing, kind of off topic of that, but more so of being green, of being aware of that. Because part of it is on the companies and part of it is you as individuals.
Yeah, on the consumer.
Yes, because companies are going to do what you pay them to do. So money talks in many ways, and that's one way, is show them that's what you want to do, and they will do it. So part of it is you enforcing them to be green because money talks.
Right. You're the customer. You are telling that company what you are and are not going to tolerate.
And that's part of how this movement started is people say, hey, this is what we want. So if you hold them accountable for it and speak that through your own actions, they will do it.
Yeah. And especially now with social media, it's so easy to start a movement and say, hey, here's what this company is doing. Do we like this? Do we not? If we don't, let's tell the company we don't like it. It's so easy to reach these companies now.
I'm sure that one that did that paper bottle, plastic paper trick, you showed me a picture of that. So they definitely got called out on it.
They did. They released a statement of, I think they basically said, we see how this could have been misleading, but we didn't intend to mislead people, kind of thing. But they can see how it was misleading.
Obviously, very much so.
Like you said, it's a paper bottle. I mean.
Well, technically, it is a paper bottle because it's covered in paper, so.
And maybe that's what they were going for. I mean, I think it did completely encompass it, so it was kind of like a paper bottle around a plastic bottle.
So they're half right.
Half right. And I guess that's what they were going for. I'm not sure.
But, do you have anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, this is something that, again, countless examples, but we can't go through all of them. So, kind of hit the keynotes, though.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll definitely have you back.
Yay.
Soon.
Awesome.
Hopefully.
I hope so. I'm happy to be here. I'm ready to go.
Me too. It's exciting having someone else on the show and just me. So hopefully everyone else doesn't get bored hearing my voice all the time, but maybe you'll have a change up every once in a while.
Yay.
But I think that's all we have for today. So I'll see y'all next time. You have a wonderful day.